one of the most powerful psychological triggers that makes a man fall hard for a woman is something many people completely overlook. It is not beauty alone. It is not charm alone. It is emotional safety. And emotionally, this changes everything. Because while attraction may begin with excitement, emotional attachment grows where a person feels safe enough to fully be themselves. A man becomes deeply connected to a woman when he feels emotionally accepted rather than constantly evaluated. This does not mean lowering standards or tolerating unhealthy behavior. Emotional safety is not about becoming emotionally passive. It is about creating an atmosphere where honesty, vulnerability, and emotional openness can exist without fear of humiliation, manipulation, or emotional punishment. Psychologically, human beings naturally move toward environments where they feel emotionally understood. And for many men, this matters more than they openly admit. A man may appear confident externally, but internally he still carries fear of failure, rejection, inadequacy, emotional judgment, or not being enough. Most men are taught from an early age to hide vulnerability rather than express it openly. So when they meet a woman around whom they can emotionally relax, something profound begins happening internally. Their guard slowly drops. You may notice he becomes more expressive, more emotionally present, more thoughtful, or more consistent. Not because he is trying harder artificially, but because emotional safety removes the need for emotional self-protection. And this is where genuine attachment often begins, because people emotionally attach to the places where they feel most accepted. We are naturally drawn toward people who make us feel emotionally calm instead of emotionally defensive. There is also a deeper philosophical truth here. Real intimacy is not built through perfection, it is built through emotional permission. The permission to speak honestly, to make mistakes, to reveal fears, and to still feel emotionally respected afterward. And emotionally mature women understand this deeply. They know that attraction is not only about creating excitement, it is also about creating trust. A woman who listens without immediately attacking, who communicates clearly instead of emotionally manipulating, and who maintains emotional steadiness during difficult months. Dimensions often creates a level of emotional connection that surface attraction alone can never compete with. Because excitement may attract attention, but emotional safety creates emotional permanence. At the same time, emotional safety must exist mutually. Healthy relationships are not one-sided emotional shelters. Both people must feel emotionally respected, emotionally heard, and emotionally valued for true intimacy to grow. And this is why emotional safety becomes such a powerful psychological trigger. It allows a man to stop performing and start connecting authentically. Because in the end, one of the deepest reasons men fall hard for certain women is not simply because those women impressed them, it is because around those women, they finally felt emotionally safe enough to be fully seen without feeling the need to constantly protect themselves. Another powerful psychological trigger that makes men fall deeply for a woman is something that often seems paradoxical at first: emotional independence. Because one of the most attractive qualities in any human being is the ability to maintain a strong sense of self while building emotional connection with someone else. And cycle. So obviously this creates both respect and intrigue. When a woman has her own purpose, standards, emotional balance, and direction in life, a man feels that her attention is meaningful rather than automatic. He senses that her world does not revolve entirely around gaining validation from him. And this changes the emotional dynamic completely. Why? Because human beings naturally value what feels emotionally intentional rather than emotionally desperate. A woman who constantly over-pursues, over-explains, or abandons her own identity for a relationship often unintentionally removes emotional tension and curiosity from the connection. But when a woman remains emotionally grounded in her own life, her goals, passions, friendships, growth, then she is able to navigate the challenges of life with greater ease and confidence. And self-respect, a man begins feeling that being close to her is something valuable he must emotionally earn and protect. And this activates deeper psychological investment. Now, emotional independence is often misunderstood. It does not mean acting cold, distant, or emotionally unavailable. Real emotional independence is not emotional avoidance. It is emotional stability. It means you can love deeply without losing yourself completely inside another person. And emotionally mature men are deeply drawn to this energy because it creates balance. It removes emotional pressure from the relationship while increasing emotional respect. There is also a deeper psychological truth truth here. Mystery is not created by playing manipulative games. It is created naturally when someone has depth beyond the relationship itself. When a woman has a rich emotional world, meaningful ambitions, intellectual curiosity, and a life she genuinely enjoys, a man becomes more curious about her. He wants to understand her more deeply because she feels emotionally layered rather than emotionally dependent. And curiosity strengthens attraction. This is why emotionally independent women often leave a stronger emotional impact. Their energy communicates abundance rather than emotional scarcity. They choose connection from desire, not desperation. There is also a philosophical layer to this. Love becomes unhealthy when it turns into emotional possession rather than emotional partnership. The strongest relationships are not built between two incomplete people trying to rescue each other emotionally. They are built between two individuals who already possess identity, self-respect, and emotional grounding and choose to walk beside each other willingly. That choice creates emotional freedom instead of emotional control. And ironically, emotional freedom often increases desire because people are naturally drawn toward those who seem emotionally whole within themselves. Because in the end, one of the strongest psychological triggers that makes a man fall hard is not a woman chasing his attention endlessly. It is seeing a woman who values herself deeply enough to maintain her own identity while still allowing genuine emotional connection to grow naturally beside it. Another psychological trigger that powerfully deepens a man's emotional attachment is genuine appreciation. And this goes far deeper than simple compliments. Psychologically, human beings are deeply affected by where they feel valued. We naturally become emotionally attached to people who recognize our effort, acknowledge our character, and make us feel that what we contribute emotionally actually matters. For many men, this emotional experience is rarer than people realize. A lot of men move through life feeling appreciated mainly for what they provide, achieve, or accomplish, not for who they are internally. They are often taught that their value comes from performance, success, strength, problem solving, stability. So when a woman genuinely notices his emotional presence, his consistency, his thoughtfulness, or the quiet ways he tries to care, it affects him deeply because appreciation creates emotional significance. Now, this does not mean excessive praise or forced validation. In fact, inauthentic admiration usually feels emotionally empty. Genuine appreciation is powerful precisely because it feels real. It comes from emotional awareness. It communicates, I see your effort. I notice your intentions. I value the energy you bring into my life, and emotionally that creates connection. This is why men often become more emotionally invested around women who acknowledge their efforts sincerely. When a man feels emotionally valued rather than constantly criticized or taken for granted, his natural desire to invest emotionally often grows stronger. Because appreciation reinforces emotional closeness, there is also an important psychological principle here. People tend to emotionally expand in environments where they feel respected. When Mione feels constantly unseen, emotionally dismissed, or unappreciated, emotional distance usually increases. But when someone feels emotionally recognized, they naturally want to give more of themselves to the connection. And this applies deeply in romantic relationships. A woman who can express gratitude, recognize emotional effort, and communicate appreciation without losing her own standards often creates emotional loyalty far more effectively than someone who relies only on attraction or emotional intensity. Because emotionally, appreciation creates emotional safety too. It reassures someone that their efforts are not invisible. There is also a deeper philosophical truth behind this. Human beings are not only searching for love, they are searching for meaning within love. We all want to feel that our presence positively impacts someone's life in a real and lasting way. And appreciation communicates that meaning directly. At the same time, healthy appreciation must remain balanced and mutual. Relationships become unhealthy when one person endlessly gives emotional validation while receiving little emotional recognition in return. Lasting emotional connection grows when each people feel valued and emotionally respected. Because true intimacy is built through mutual emotional nourishment, not one-sided admiration. And in the end, one of the strongest psychological triggers that makes a man fall hard for a woman is not simply beauty or excitement. It is the rare emotional experience of feeling genuinely appreciated by someone whose opinion matters deeply enough to touch his heart beyond his ego. Another psychological trigger that deeply affects affects male attraction is confidence, and not the loud performative kind designed to impress everyone in the room, but the quiet confidence that comes from genuine self-worth. Because psychologically, confidence changes the emotional energy of every interaction. A woman who values herself communicates something powerful without needing to say it directly. Through her boundaries, her communication, her emotional stability, and the way she carries herself, she signals that her sense of identity does not depend entirely on external validation. And that energy is deeply magnetic. Why? Because human beings are naturally drawn toward people who appear emotionally grounded within themselves. Confidence suggests emotional security. It creates the impression that someone chooses connection from desire rather than desperation. And this completely changes how attraction develops. When a woman constantly seeks reassurance, abandons her standards to avoid losing someone, or tolerates disrespect out of fear of being alone, the emotional dynamic often becomes unstable. But when a woman communicates self-respect calmly and consistently, a man begins seeing her differently psychologically. He sees emotional strength, and emotional strength creates admiration. This is why confidence often increases attraction more than perfection ever could. A woman does not need to appear flawless to leave a powerful emotional impact. In fact, people are often more drawn to authenticity than perfection because authenticity feels emotionally real. A confident woman is not trying to convince everyone of her value every second. She already understands her worth internally, and because of that, her energy feels calmer, more secure, and more emotionally attractive. There is also a deeper psychological principle here. People tend to mirror the value we place on ourselves. If someone consistently communicates through their behavior that they do not respect their own needs, boundaries, or emotional well-being, others often unconsciously respond to that energy. But when someone protects their emotional standards with calm confidence, it changes the level of respect they receive. And this is not manipulation. It is emotional psychology. There is also a philosophical layer to this. Real confidence is not arrogance. Arrogance usually hides insecurity. True confidence is self-acceptance. It is the ability to know your worth without needing to dominate, chase validation endlessly, or shrink yourself to maintain connection. And emotionally mature men are deeply affected by this kind of energy because it creates emotional balance rather than emotional chaos. A confident woman inspires pursuit not because she plays games, but because her presence communicates emotional wholeness. She adds value to connection without emotionally begging for it. At the same time, confidence must remain connected to kindness and emotional openness. Walls are not confidence. Emotional unavailability is not strength. Healthy confidence allows intimacy while still maintaining self-respect. Because in the end, one of the strongest psychological triggers that makes a man fall hard is encountering a woman whose self-worth feels so genuine that being chosen by her feels emotionally meaningful, valuable, and deeply rare. One of the most misunderstood truths about attraction is this. Physical beauty may capture attention, but emotional depth is what creates lasting emotional attachment. And psychologically, this distinction matters enormously, because initial attraction often happens quickly and instinctively. A man may notice beauty within seconds, but emotional connection, the kind that keeps someone emotionally invested over time, develops through depth, meaning, and emotional experience. This is why some women leave a temporary impression while others stay in a man's mind long after the interaction ends. A woman with emotional depth creates conversations and experiences that go beyond surface-level attraction. She brings curiosity, emotional awareness, perspective, vulnerability, and intellectual presence into the connection. Around her, conversations feel meaningful rather than repetitive, and emotionally meaningful experiences create stronger psychological attachment. Human beings naturally become attached to what emotionally stimulates them beyond the surface. We remember people who make us think differently, feel deeply, reflect honestly, or experience emotional connection in ways that feel rare. This is why emotional depth becomes such a powerful trigger. When a man feels he can discuss fears, ambitions, relationships, personal growth, life experiences, and deeper emotional truths with a woman, he can discuss his fears, ambitions, relationships, personal growth, life experiences, and deeper emotional truths with a woman. The connection often becomes far more psychologically significant than attraction based only on appearance. Because emotional depth creates emotional memorability, and there is also a deeper philosophical truth behind this. Human beings do not only crave excitement, they crave understanding. We want someone who sees beyond our social masks and connects with the deeper parts of who we are. A woman with emotional depth often creates this experience naturally. She is emotionally present enough to engage with someone's inner world instead of remaining trapped in superficial interaction. And this changes how a man feels around her. He begins associating her presence not only with attraction, but with emotional stimulation, emotional peace, and emotional meaning. Over time, this creates a stronger form of attachment because the connection begins feeding both emotional and intellectual needs simultaneously. This is why emotionally mature men eventually prioritize depth over perfection. Physical attraction may open the door, but emotional substance determines whether someone truly wants to stay emotionally connected. At the same time, emotional depth does not mean becoming emotionally heavy or serious constantly. Depth can exist alongside humor, playfulness, lightness, and joy. In fact, the most emotionally magnetic people often balance emotional intelligence with warmth and emotional openness. Because real depth is not about complexity for the sake of appearing interesting. It is about authenticity, emotional awareness, and the ability to connect meaningfully. And in the end, one of the strongest psychological triggers that makes a man fall hard is meeting a woman whose presence affects not only his eyes, but also his mind, his emotions, and the deeper parts of himself he rarely shares with the world. The final and perhaps most powerful psychological trigger in understanding why men fall hard is this: making a man feel emotionally significant. And this is deeper than attention, deeper than attraction, deeper than even appreciation. Because at the core of human psychology, one of our strongest emotional needs is to feel that we matter in someone else's inner world. Not in a superficial way, but in a meaningful, emotionally real way. When a man feels emotionally significant to a woman, something shifts internally. He does not just feel noticed, he feels valued in a way that connects to his identity, his emotions, and his sense of purpose within the relationship. And this creates emotional attachment at a very deep level. Now, emotional significance is not created through constant praise or over-validation. In fact, excessive admiration without depth often loses its meaning. Emotional significance is created through presence, responsiveness, and genuine emotional investment. It is when a woman listens in a way that makes him feel understood, not just heard. It is when she responds in a way that shows emotional awareness rather than indifference. It is when she makes him feel that his thoughts, emotions, and presence actually have weight in her world. And psychologically, this is incredibly powerful because human beings are wired to move toward people who make them feel important in a grounded, authentic way. We naturally become attached to those who reflect back a meaningful version of ourselves. There is also a deeper philosophical truth here. People are not just searching for love, they are searching for emotional recognition. We want to feel that our presence adds something real to another person's life, that we are not invisible, that we are not replaceable in the emotional experience we share with someone. And when that recognition is felt consistently, emotional attachment becomes almost inevitable. A man may enter a connection with curiosity, attraction, or even excitement, but over time, what keeps him emotionally invested is whether he feels that his presence truly matters, whether he is emotionally impactful in your world, whether he is someone you genuinely choose to engage with not out of obligation, but out of real emotional interests. And this is where emotional significance becomes different from simple attention. Attention can be given to anyone, but emotional significance is reserved for someone who occupies a meaningful space in your emotional reality. At the same time, healthy psychological significance must always be mutual. Real connection is not built on one person carrying the emotional importance of the entire relationship. It grows when both people feel valued, respected, and emotionally acknowledged in return. Because imbalance eventually creates distance, not attachment. And in the end, one of the deepest psychological reasons men fall hard for certain women is not just because they are attractive, kind, or confident, but because in her presence, they feel like they genuinely matter in a way that feels emotionally real, deeply human, and impossible to ignore.